Okay, so let's get into the NFL preview for the week. I do not have my notes for how we did last week. I do not believe it was very well, but we will power on through. So here we go. It is I guess I should write these down somewhere here. I was just using my notebook as a mic stand. It is early morning football over in England, Tottenham Stadium, I believe, as the New York Jets take on Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings are 2.5-point favorites with the total at 40.5. I have said the biggest, one of the big rules I have is let's avoid the London games. But holy hell are they tempting me, because I don't know how you can watch what the Jets have done in the first few weeks and say, oh no, this team is only 3 points worse than the Minnesota Vikings. They got this. Everything's going to be fine. Totally not an issue at all. Don't even need to worry about it. Vikings have, or the Jets have got this one. I don't believe that. I think the Vikings are a better coached football team, and I don't want to overreact too much, because I think a lot of overreacting happened after Thursday Night Football with when the Jets kicked the shit out of the Patriots. That was Mayo's first time running a short week like that, and it was a team that really just didn't look prepared, and the Jets went in and just whooped them. Aside from that, the Jets haven't looked all that good. But you also don't want to overreact to last week when they lost to Denver. And I explained on Monday how this was a game that was very frustrating because, oh, well, it's the elements. It's like, okay, well, you have Aaron Rodgers. He's played in minus $1 billion a bunch. He's playing Bo Nix. Who's Bo Nix? Why is the weather the problem for you guys? So I don't want to overreact too much to that, but it seems like everyone is trying really hard to not overreact to the Vikings now, and I think to see where both teams are at through 4 weeks, and to suggest that the Vikings at a neutral site are only 2.5 points better than the Jets, come on. So we are going to go Vikings in this spot. We're going to go Vikings minus 2.5 for this one, for a pick. And also, again, none of this is gambling advice. This is just my pick for each one, because for every NFL game this year after week 1, we go through and make a pick per game. And that's kind of the old gimmick here. And that's how we do it. And so that is that. I don't have lines for player props or anything like that, but we are going to take a look at a Wilson prop in this. And as we kind of transition into the fantasy football talk for this game, when you look at the New York Jets, Garrett Wilson has to get going in this game. And last week it was, okay, well, Surtain's on him. You kind of still have to start him. This week, the Vikings have done a good job of taking away number 1 receivers, but it has been a bit more of a team effort. And so I think that Garrett Wilson, this is the one where he needs to be good. And this is the one where if he's not, you get a little bit concerned about that, because it just seems like everything else with Aaron Rodgers, it's kind of clicking a little bit. But that one, you get a little bit worried. And then they go off Buffalo, which maybe isn't the defense we thought they were. And then they face the Steelers coming up in week 7. So there's going to be a little bit more focus here on Garrett Wilson. This is the one where he needs to get right. And so because of that, I think deeper leagues you can go Allen Lazard. I think you can feel comfortable-ish with that. That is a bit more of a desperation type of a move. Breece Hall, I think you still play him. But I do think that Braylon Allen is certainly worthy of a look as well. And if you're desperate, Ty Conklin, you could do worse than him at the tight end spot. For the Vikings, you're starting your guys, right? I don't think I would go Sam Darnold this week. I think I would try to find something else at quarterback. Aaron Jones, absolutely. And we saw Addison is a impactful part of this roster as well, so him and Jefferson, I think you can roll with that. Also, just a speculative ad, I think you can go out and look for a TJ Hawkinson now for the Vikings. I think we are getting to a point where it sounds like it might actually be a little bit close. And as I go through, also, I said on the show the other day, oh, hey, the Vampire League, I'm feeling good. Gino had a better than expected day yesterday, and I didn't. Bucky Irving did not break through in the way that I would hope in a 36-30 game on Thursday Night Football. So we're a little bit behind in that one, but I do think that TJ Hawkinson is an interesting speculative ad for some teams now, as the tight end spot has been just abject disaster this season. And this is, you know, oh, Mike Evans. Hey, there you go. But the tight end spot has absolutely been just a profound disaster. And I think TJ Hawkinson, A, is talented, and B, is part of a pretty good offense and a pretty good situation. So I do think that you can look at that and feel all right about kind of how things are going when he comes back. Anyway, and yeah, no kidding, toxic. 20 points. Oh yeah, no, that's all. That's all Mike Evans. Yeah, a couple receiving touchdowns, 5 receptions for 62 yards. Yeah, no, that'll do it. A good start against the silver bullet that is Eric this week. So that one should be an intense matchup. But Mike Evans helping you out there. All right, let's move on. Dolphins taking on the New England Patriots. Patriots are favored by a point. Holy crap. The total in this game is 36.5. All right. I don't think there's a whole lot to analyze in this game. The Patriots suck. The Dolphins are quite bad. I don't know if I can get to a point where I would have the Dolphins below New England. I get this game is at Foxborough, and I get it has been dreadful for Miami so far. But they just, like, they have too many players to be worse than New England, don't they? I guess they did just lose to Tennessee, but maybe Tennessee's better than we thought they were going to be, right? Or maybe not. I think Tennessee's better than their record would indicate. Anyway, let's just say it that way. So the call in this game is Miami and New England under 36.5. No way do I think any points are being scored in this game at all. From a fantasy standpoint, boy, you don't want to use anyone. For New England, you got to keep rolling with Ramondre. You got to hope that at some point he got, like, just what are the chances he fumbles every game? You know, like that at some point that's going to stop, right? But he's a talented running back. I think you go with him. But you do keep an eye with Antonio Gibson. In deep leagues, I think he might have a bit of value there. But aside from that, like, I don't think you're starting anyone. And on the Miami side, it's tough. Like, you have, what, are you going to sit Tyreek Hill? You're not, right? Like, you're not going to do that. Jalen Waddle, kind of the same. I'm in a spot where I kind of have to start Mostert this week if he is healthy, given bye weeks and stuff like that. And so I think the running back, so you are understanding that this is, I just picked under 36.5. So we are hoping that whatever Miami player you are starting, you hope that is the one that trips and falls into the end zone. But this is an ugly game. Speaking of, off to Chicago we go. It's the Bears taking on the Carolina Panthers. Bears are favored by 4 at home, with the point total sitting at 40.5. And this is one I have tried to fight believing in the Chicago Bears because of how bad this offense is, but I do think that this is a game that this defense wins. I think they go out and just obliterate that offensive line for the Carolina Panthers, and that pass rush for Chicago is legit, and that is going to be an issue, I think, for Carolina. I just don't think that they have the offensive line to hold up to this defense. And so I think this will be a bit of a come down for Carolina. So we are going to go with Chicago. We are going to take them -4. Carolina's defense, like in this whole thing, this resurgence that they have had under Andy Dalton, where they have surged to 1 win. You look at it, they have back-to-back games. They gave up 34 points to the Bengals and 22 to the Raiders, which is like giving up 34 points to anyone else. So I think that this defense maybe is still not good. And while I do not think that means Chicago lights the world on fire, I do think that this is going to be probably another low-scoring game. So we are also going to go under. Sorry, I know the camera's shaking on these. I could just go back and re-listen after, but who wants to do that, right? 40.5 is the total. We're going to go under that one as well. But Chicago -4 is definitely one that has our interest this week, shall we say. From a fantasy football standpoint, I think I made it pretty clear. I'm not super trusting a lot of my Panthers this week. I'm definitely not going with Andy Dalton. Deontay Johnson, he has certainly found a role in this offense, and I think that as a flex option, you can still start him this week. Xavier Legette, I liked him last week. I like him as a player just in general. I would try to not this week if I were you and see if you can get a better option out there. With the running backs, Chuba is getting his and he's continuing to make it work. I think you kind of just keep rolling with him and you're basically hoping that he gets the touchdown, right? On the Chicago side, definitely not Caleb Williams. That one is a need to see a few good games out of that. But I think you can start the pass catchers. I think you can feel comfortable with the healthy pass catchers for Chicago. You can roll out with that. DeAndre Swift, he has a big game, but I'm not loving it. But I do think you can trust it a little bit here against Carolina. And for deep leagues, I do think Roschon Johnson getting some goal line work is legitimate. So there's actually a decent amount of fantasy options from this game. The Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the Indianapolis Colts. The total is at 45.5. Jacksonville favored by 3 points. The Jags are now 0-4 after a close loss last week against the Houston Texans, while the Indianapolis Colts coming off of a win over the Pittsburgh Steelers. What are we looking at for Anthony Richardson injury status right now? Questionable with an oblique. Okay. This is going to be, I think, a probably year-long thing with the Indianapolis Colts in the not trusting of Anthony Richardson and not knowing what you are going to get out of this player on a week-in, week-out basis now, given the injury. And it sounds like it's just kind of a pain tolerance thing at this point, which is not fun to deal with. Certainly, when you're trying to get a kid experience when he's only played like 20 football games in the last 3 years. So it's a tricky spot. That this is a absolute stay away for me. I want no part of this game at all. Jacksonville, it should be better. It's not getting better. And I have some, very big concerns about this one. So 45.5 seems kind of high for these two teams, given the potential struggles on offense for Anthony Richardson. I will say, though, I think that a little bit of the narrative is getting just the slightest bit overblown. Well, oh, Joe Flacco came in and led the team to victory. Like, yes, he did. I will say, though, Richardson was looking good in the first parts of those games. They were starting to complete the ball downfield and actually moving it a little bit. And so that did help. So he was looking good. But there's just too many question marks on either side of this game for me to assume that this is going to be a high-scoring game. And it pains me that 45.5 is a high-scoring game, but I'm going to go under 45.5 there. The Houston Texans are at home against the Bills of Buffalo. The Texans favored by 1. This is certainly the game of the early slate, as the Houston Texans try to get things figured out, and Buffalo kind of gets deflated a little bit and brought back down to earth after getting just whooped on by the Baltimore Ravens last week. And I think that was a really good indicator of maybe we were taking things a little bit too serious. Toxic's making moves. Toxic's picking up people while we just did a Colts breakdown. Also, I forgot to give fantasy advice, but one of the things I would say is keep an eye on Trey Sermon. And Toxic just comes in. Boom. Trey Sermon. Mine. Loading up. From a fantasy standpoint in the Vampire League. So making moves. Toxic. We'll get back to the fantasy breakdown of that game in a minute. Apologies. I missed that one. But, yeah, Buffalo, I think this was a reminder that, yes, things have gone very well. And I had said, like, they were playing the best football in the NFL going into Sunday night against the Baltimore Ravens. It was a nice reminder that they were playing the best football against Jacksonville, who has a lot of shit they need to get figured out. Miami, who ditto, and Arizona, who sure do try really hard, but maybe have a few holes in their game. And so maybe we shouldn't have taken Buffalo as seriously as we did. And I think that comes around in this one as well. I think this is going to be a game where they have real trouble stopping the Houston Texans. I think this is going to be one that is going to be a real high-scoring game. And so I think that this is going to be over that 47.5. And I do think that it'll be the Texans covering this one. I think Houston kind of comes back down to earth. Or I think Buffalo continues to kind of come back down to earth and kind of settles in as a good, not great team. Hey, Deeds, how's it going? Thanks for popping into the chat again today. I appreciate it. From a fantasy standpoint, toxic. From a fantasy standpoint, sorry, I always struggle because I am not the advanced streamer that I should be, and I don't have the chats on the side. Like, we have it just in the thing. But I put all these up on YouTube after. And so I'm reacting to things that are going on in the chat. And the people who watch these on YouTube don't have a fucking clue what's going on. So apologies for those watching after. Maybe I'll try to get that rectified here in a little bit. But from a fantasy standpoint, I kind of think you're starting everybody. I just took over 47.5. So Khalil Shakir on Buffalo is someone I think you can trust. James Cook, I think they should trust him more, but I think you can roll with that. And from a Texans standpoint, sounds like Tank Dell is back. Roll with him. tell me Diggs isn't going to have a big week. And Nico Collins is making a very strong case for being like a #1 overall pick next year. Obviously, we're starting the quarterbacks here. Keep an eye on Joe Mixon. What are we looking at here for Mixon's health? I just told you to start Khalil Shakir. He's out this week. Apologies. So don't start him. But I do think that is a... Well, let's go through the rest of the thing here. Before... I think that opened... I really do think that... why am I blanking on the name now? Keon Coleman, right? That's him. I do think that is a player that the Bills, I think, are just kind of scratching the surface on here a little bit. And they are he is a player that I think that they can kind of roll with a little bit more. It's funny, I was listening to Bet the Board, and they were talking about how, like, all the guys who were there before, the Cook, the Shakir, I guess they drafted Coleman, but Kincaid, all those guys are doing well. But the guys who they brought in, the MVS, the Curtis Samuel, all that, none of those guys are really clicking in the way that they need them to. But no, I think Coleman has a pretty good game here this week, and that would be one that I certainly would be looking at in fantasy football as someone who I think can step up, because I think Josh Allen with Stephon Diggs on that other sideline, given how we all perceive that whole breakup went, I think that's going to be one that there's going to be a little bit of fuck you going on in that particular matchup. But I am here on the injury part because I wanted to see Joe Mixon. Boy, they got a lot of guys hurt right now. Is Mixon not even on the injury report for the Texans? Are we that much of a good to go? Or am I just missing this? All right, so I think Joe Mixon's good to go in this game. If he is, that is 100% a go. Joe Mixon is not Derrick Henry, but Joe Mixon is also not a very good running back. So I think that this is going to be a... oh, shit. Well, now here at Fantasy Footballers, Joe Mixon not expected to suit up. Not expected to play Week 5. Okay, apologies. I'm looking at the... I don't know why he's not on this injury report thing that I'm looking at, or if I'm just blowing past him. That does change it a little bit, and honestly, now that we've kind of, gone over that, I'm going to change it. I am going to go Buffalo +1. Okay, see? Toxic knows. Trey Sermon in place of Joe Mixon. That's actually a really good call. This is showing how close this game is. I've scratched this out 2 times now. I'm sticking with Houston -1 as my pick for this game. Cam Akers just hasn't really shown that explosiveness, and I do think that this Houston team does rely on the run, probably too much, but that is an aspect of their game that is going to be, I think, severely lacking. I think if you are kind of desperate, or if you need like a real cheap DFS play, I think Cam Akers is actually a sneaky good play for you this week. Okay, so in-depth injury analysis there for sure. I did miss the fantasy breakdown on Colts Jaguars. Toxic has already picked up Trey Sermon. I think that's a good call. He looked good. Like, in the runs that he was getting in place of Jonathan Taylor last week, that there looked like there was some explosion there. And so I think monitor the injury report with everything with, do a better job of it than I did, with Jonathan Taylor and everything like that. But I do think that you can, Taylor is questionable right now with that ankle injury, but we'll see. If nothing else, I think there's going to be a little bit of a split. But aside from that, I think you can trust Pittman. It's so tough to trust anyone else in Indianapolis right now, so that's probably all I would do. On the Jacksonville side, Brian Thomas is legit. You roll with him every week. ETN, just based on where you drafted him and the fact that we're into buys now, you probably have to. But Tank Bigsby continues to be a really good speculative ad. Bigsby should be owned in almost every league because of the opportunity that could be there. And I do think that this would be a game that I would start Trevor Lawrence in. I can't trust Anthony Richardson until we see it for a week at least. There. So that is the fantasy breakdown for a game we talked about a little bit earlier. The Cincinnati Bengals are at home against the Baltimore Ravens. The total is 49.5. Baltimore coming in as a 2.5-point favorite. A lot of people that I have heard, a lot of smart people who I listen to, are on the Bengals this week, and I can't get there with this group. I think defensively that there have been just too many holes for this team to really overcome. They get a good win last week against Carolina, but they couldn't stop anything against Washington, which we're seeing. That's not the worst thing, but I don't buy into this defense being able to stop Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. Now, we had a big thing last week, and this is going to come up in the next game too, but we had a big thing last year where Every week, a team would have a big, like, seismic change their spots in the power rankings win. And then the next week they come out and shit the bed. And so I am a little bit worried about that from a Baltimore Ravens standpoint. But coming up after this for Baltimore, they have the Giants and the Browns. So I don't think we have to worry about a look-ahead spot or anything like that. I think they're going to be really focused on this game. This is a huge one for them. And when you look at the Bengals, their offense so far this season has done well against Carolina and Washington. Like, I'm not buying that this offense is all figured out. The Chiefs did a pretty good job of limiting them, and obviously New England kind of just took their lunch money in week 1. Now, Baltimore, the defense does have some holes. That is legitimate. But I do think that this offense, they are figuring out what they have in Derrick Henry, and they are figuring out how to kind of utilize everyone here. And so I think that is I think it's a really good football team over in Baltimore. And so I am going against all of the smart people and going with Baltimore -2.5 for this one. Washington taking on the Cleveland Browns. The Commanders are favored by 3.5 points with the total at 43.5. Sorry, we'll get to that in a second. Fantasy football. Can you tell I've done this for a decade? Fantasy football for the Bengals and the Ravens. Joe Burrow both quarterbacks have been drafted in spots where I think you kind of have to every week, right? Lamar, I think, has a good matchup this week. On the Bengals side, like, you're starting Chase. Higgins is becoming maybe a bit more of a factor in these things. And so I think that there is an option there to maybe take advantage of. From a running back standpoint, Chase Brown continues to look good, and I think he's going to continue to get a little bit of the work, but I think Zach Moss is probably going to get more of it. So Brown is a bit more of a if you're desperate on a buy sort of a situation, while Moss is the more stable option in that backfield, which I think says a lot. Also, people are going to be pissed about Mike Gesicki from last week. I think there's an opportunity here. We have seen where you beat Baltimore is over the middle of the field, and I think that Gesicki has a real chance to pick up a lot of, like, kind of, I think he's going to be a PPR beast this week. I think he does have a really good week. So he would be one that I would kind of target in DFS maybe. From a Baltimore standpoint, Zay Flowers is quite good, and so I think you trust him. Obviously, Derrick Henry. This one feels like it's going to be a bit of a closer game, and so I do think that there's going to be a bit more Justice Hill involved. So I think for deep leagues, I think that I think that you can roll with that. Deeds, fuck running backs. Both my RBs are currently questionable. Yeah, that's a thing. I'm in a lot of leagues, but I'm in one where I have either everyone on bye or hurt this week, and I got 2 guys in my lineup. One's questionable, and it looks like they're probably going to go, but the other is Taysom Hill, and he's questionable with fractured ribs, I think it is, and that doesn't seem like fun. So that's and it's the Monday Nighter, too. So, I don't want to drop anyone on my bench. We already had to drop someone who I didn't want to drop anyway. Also, I discovered yesterday, that league doesn't have an IR spot. So, for commissioners out there, IR spots. I put 4 in the Vampire League. So, I thought that would help me because I could stash people, but then everyone else realized there was 4 IR spots and they're stashing their people. So, that's been a little annoying. But I like IR spots are fine. And the fact that we didn't have any, and I have Rashee Rice, and they're saying, oh, well, it could be 4 weeks. Like, can y'all fuck off with that, please? But still, that was just a mini rant. So yeah, no, it's tough out there. Deeds, for sure. Oh yeah, London. That was a thing, hey? But back to this game. Bengals and Ravens. I do think for the Deedses of the world, who both running backs are questionable right now. Honestly, I think Justice Hill isn't the worst play. I think he's going to get a lot of looks out of that backfield in a pass catching role, and I think that's going to be this is going to be a close game. I think all the way down, and so I think 2-minute drills. Oh, Baltimore, all of a sudden, they're down by 3. We need to pass the ball. In comes Justice Hill for a full drive, and they really start to utilize things. The Mark Andrews one, if you can't trust him anymore, I understand that entirely. I do still think, given how tight end is, you kind of have to roll with him, but I can fully understand not at this point. Okay, Browns against Washington. It is the Commanders, favored by 3.5 points with a total of 43.5. For Washington, they are obviously the darlings right now, coming off of a couple of very explosive games. They are 3-1. They are the talk of the NFL, and they are kicking the shit out of people. Their offense so far in the 4 games this season has scored 20 points. 21 points, but then in the last couple of weeks, 38 and 42. Going up against a Cleveland Browns defense that I still think is good but not great. This entire, I guess, handicap or prediction or whatever is solely based on nothing I have seen on the football field. It is just, quite frankly, things are going too good in Washington right now. And so I do think that this is just a little bit of the air getting let out. And what we talked about in the Baltimore game, where last year, teams that had like this big, like this is their biggest win of the year, kind of came back and laid an egg in their next matchup. And so that's, again, it's all anecdotal. It's all a trendy thing. It's not actual on the field analysis. I just have this feeling that we're all too much on Washington right now. And look, if they come out and kick the shit out of Cleveland, then I will change my tune. And look, this could be a team that makes the playoffs, right? And we kind of even said in the preseason, in the previews, like, look, this is a team that I kind of want to get to the playoffs, but I just can't get there with this defense. Now, the Browns are not a team that's going to take advantage of that, but I do think that this is an all-right defensive team that will have a better understanding of how to defend against Washington than other teams have. So I am going, this is the furthest thing from something I'm going to click on this week. This is just a feel. I'm going to go Cleveland plus 3.5. You lose by a field goal and you still win this one for Cleveland. The Raiders taking on the Denver Broncos. The total's at 35.5. Oh, sorry, fantasy. God damn it. Fantasy football advice. I can't imagine sitting someone against Washington's defense. So Amari Cooper, can we get Amari Cooper out of Cleveland? Can we do that? What a career this guy has had. With the Raiders, when they're awful, I don't know why I had to specify that. It's the Raiders. They've always been awful. They're my favorite team. I can say that. It goes to Dallas for a little bit, and it's fun. And then he gets moved to Cleveland, and now it's dog shit again. Let's get this guy. Can the Chiefs trade for Amari Cooper, please? Can they just do that? That would be so much fun to have that guy there. Can we just get him out of Cleveland? Because he is, I think, a stud, and I think you have to roll with that. And I think Jerry Jeudy, you can roll with him as well. Running back, Jerome Ford, yep. Trust in it. On the Washington side, like, who are you sitting right now because of how good this team is? I know I just went through that whole thing of, well, maybe Cleveland's defense limits and blah, 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 blah. You're still... There's no way I'm telling you to sit Jaden Daniels on the run that he is on. With the running backs, Brian Robinson, Eckler got banged up, and McNichols actually looked really interesting in that backfield. So that's... I'm not saying start him, or either of those guys. I think Robinson is kind of the only one that you can go with. I know he's questionable with a knee. I do think he'll be fine, but I mean, keep an eye on that situation because McNichols is, I think really talented and really quite good. And McLaurin, I think you can trust as well. So that's basically start everyone is one, even the tight end, Ertz, right? Yeah, start Zach Ertz this week. Raiders taking on the Denver Broncos. Totals at 35.5. That's disgusting. And the spread is Denver minus 2.5. There's a lot going on in Vegas right now with the whole Devontae Adams thing. Also, if Cleveland could get out of their own way, I think they kind of kicked the shit out of the Raiders last week. Amari Cooper had an 80 to 85-yard touchdown called back for a holding call that was just kind of That they had some pass interference on plays as well that really kind of ruined things. And so, like, I think the Raiders were kind of outplayed in that game. I can't in all good conscience give up points to pick Denver, though. So I will take 2.5 and go with the Raiders in this spot. And boy, if that gets to 3, that might actually be something to click on because Denver doesn't strike me as a team that blows anyone out. From fantasy football, God, I hope you don't have to start anyone this week. For Denver... kind of nobody. If you have to, Cortland Sutton, he might get something here against the Raiders. I just said Amari Cooper almost had a gigantic touchdown against the Raiders, so, I mean, maybe Cortland Sutton gets that. Javonte Williams, if you're desperate, which it sounds like some people might be, but aside from that, not a whole lot. On the Raiders side, I don't want anything to do with their running game at all. Zamir White has been just dreadful to start this year. The pass catchers, I do think, like, Bowers has worked his way into being maybe the best player in this offense when Devontae Adams gets traded. Jacoby Myers is actually way more talented than I give him credit for, and has played quite well so far this year. And they got this kid Tucker, who they are. And this is the one thing that I've been really happy about from a Raiders standpoint. They're showing some creativity in the offense. And Tucker is one of those guys who can go out and get it done with the speed that he has and some of the creativity that he has been rolling with. So that has been, I think, a real nice kind of growth moment there for the Raiders and Tucker. So I think for deeper leagues and maybe even like some not so deep leagues, that's a pickup. I don't know if I'm playing him this week unless you have to, but that's certainly a pickup that you can roll with. Also, I am now just realizing that I normally schedule these Friday ones for noon. So I don't know why I was panicked to get this started at 10, but here we are. We're getting it early and getting it all out of the way on a scrambled Friday, but that just shows you where my head has been the last couple of days. The 49ers minus 7.5 as they take on the Arizona Cardinals with the total at 49.5. San Francisco, they get the offense a little bit more on track last week against the New England Patriots. There was a couple of times where they were settling for field goals, maybe a little bit too much, but this is still a team that is showing now all the different things that they have. And I think you can start to feel a little bit more confident from a 49ers standpoint. But for Arizona, it has been a little bit limited the last couple of games. I do think 7.5 is a bit too much of a spread between these two. I do think that Arizona has kind of just, they've stumbled a little bit, and it hasn't looked all that great. Washington did just mollywop those guys, and Detroit did a pretty good job of limiting them. And so when you do look at it, it is 14 points and 13 points in the last couple of games. But I still think that there is a lot of offensive upside on this side. And I do think that San Francisco's defense, they just keep getting banged up and they keep getting banged up and they keep getting banged up. So I actually do think that Arizona covers the spread in this one. And so I will take Arizona plus 7.5. I just think that Arizona's offense is going to be enough to kind of keep pace with what San Francisco does. The 49ers probably win this game, but I do think that Arizona kind of keeps it close anyway. And from a fantasy standpoint, Kyler Murray, you're starting. James Conner, same. Harrison, yes. And we've said, like, deeper leagues, Wilson is getting more of the snaps, and now he's starting to get more of the targets, so he's someone that you can trust as well. And on the 49ers side, I think the Jennings thing's probably kind of done with Kittle and Samuel back. Ayuk, we had a conversation about him on on Tuesday, about whether we can trust him or not. I do think you have to kind of keep trusting him, but I don't think I would put I don't think I would put Jennings ahead of him. So we're back to Jennings being let's keep him around and just see. But I'm not trusting him at this point. But then I think you can go with Mason and then the studs over in San Francisco. And I think Purdy is a quarterback that you can start this week. The Giants taking on the Seattle Seahawks. The total is at 42.5 with Seattle, the home favorite, of 7. The Giants are bad, okay? Seattle's defense kind of got lit up last week against the Detroit Lions. They kind of just couldn't stop anything. And so I am seeing a few people trending a little bit more on the Giants side, and thinking like Seattle's defense, like maybe they're not going to be able to stop this, and that's going to be that. There's a big difference, I think, between Daniel Jones and Jared Goff, right? And there's a big difference between like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Wan'Dale Robinson, and I don't even know who to compare on the Giants beyond that, because you've never heard of any of them. Malik Neighbors is going to be out this week with a concussion, and so I don't see how the Giants keep up with this. And also the Giants defense isn't going to do shit against the Seattle offense. So I think that this is one that you can feel comfortable with taking Seattle minus the 7. If you want to throw them on a bit of a teaser side, maybe you can do that, although there aren't a whole lot of other obvious options in this one. Maybe adding 6 to the Raiders, so you can take it through a couple of key numbers there and go Raiders plus 8.5 along with a Seattle tease at minus 7. Again, not advice, just putting it out there, you know. From a fantasy standpoint, I do think you can go with Wan'Dale Robinson. Like, there were yards to be had through the air last week for the Lions against Seattle. And Wan'Dale Robinson got just a shitload of targets. I think it was 11 receptions for 71 yards, which kind of tells you all you need to know about this offense. But I think that he is going to be a factor. But the rest of them, like, I guess if you're desperate and like Singletary is a fine start, I guess, this week with how Gibbs was able to power run the ball against Seattle. And so that is, that's an option as well, but those are the only two. And for Seattle, I think you can start everybody. Kenneth Walker looked like a stud, and goddamn was that annoying. I lost to Aaron Vickers from NHL.com in Calgary Media League because Kenneth Walker just kept scoring touchdowns. It was funny. We had, and I know no one wants to hear about anyone else's fantasy league, but we had just an absolutely putrid battle on Sunday. And then Monday night comes, and it's just Kenneth Walker, touchdown. Jamison Williams, 70-yard touchdown. And we just, like, our Monday night guys were just, like, back and forth, just absolute haymakers. And eventually, last Kenneth Walker score ends up putting him over the top. But, yeah, it was quite the performance. And I think he is a guy. I do think you can still start Charbonnet. I think he is a bit more of a flex option. And I think you roll with Smith and Jigba, Lockett, and Metcalf at receiver. And you just kind of hope that it's their game. Lockett, like, I think there's going to be room for all of them to contribute in this game anyway. Rams taking on the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are favored by 3. The total is at 48.5. I am curious as to why this is so low. And this is maybe this is an overreaction from me. But one of the things we talked about on Tuesday is it's time for us to stop taking the Rams so seriously. Because they continue to just let us down and let us down and let us down. And they had that nice showing in week 1 against Detroit, where they kind of hung around and forced that game into overtime. And then they get a win over the 49ers in a great comeback. But that was a Lions team that, I mean, they still only scored 20. And the Lions put up some yards. They just weren't able to finish drives, and they're still figuring some stuff out. Week 2, they get just shit pumped by Arizona, and it's 21-0 before that game really even started. And then week 3, they're getting curb stomped by San Francisco until the fourth quarter when Kyle Shanahan all over that game, and they blew another late lead, and the Rams were able to come back. And then last week, they had way too much trouble with that Chicago Bears team. So you'll excuse me if I don't know why we need to take them seriously, even at home against the Green Bay Packers. The Rams do have a bit more of a home field advantage at SoFi than the Chargers do, but you're going to tell me that place ain't going to be at least like 40% Packers fans on Sunday afternoon in Los Angeles in October? Yeah, there's going to be fans from Green Bay who want to get the hell out of Dodge for a weekend to go to LA. Yeah, 100%. So I think that this is going to be a Green Bay team that actually puts up quite a few points. I know there's no Christian Walker, but this is why you have like 18 talented wide receivers on your team, is so that when one guy goes down, you just keep filling them up and you don't really have to worry about any of the repercussions, and you just kind of keep rolling with that. So I think the Green Bay Packers get the job done. And I just think this offense is too good for this defense to stop. Like, they gave up 24 points to Chicago last week. And Chicago is one of the easier teams to defend. You just send 5, and all of a sudden you've cracked the code. And so I think seeing how Jordan Love got back into the swing of things in the back part of that game against Minnesota, I think he's going to be a bit more ready, a bit more prepared, and going to come out and beat on the LA Rams. So that one surprises me to the point where I'm looking at it like, what am I missing in this one? We'll be waiting all day for Sunday night. It'll be the Steelers, 2.5-point favorites at home against the Dallas Cowboys, the total at 43.5. This one I don't think will be very pretty, but I do agree that the Pittsburgh Steelers should be favored here. I was worried we were taking a lot of favorites, but there was a stretch in the middle there where we took some underdogs, because I'm going Steelers here in this one as well. Pittsburgh, offensively, that they showed a little bit last week against Indy, and the Dallas defense is banged up and also isn't good. And so I think that this is going to be a week where there are going to be some points scored. Hey, Conrad, how's it going? This is going to be a week where there's going to be some points scored for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think Justin Fields continues to learn this offense. Arthur Smith continues to learn how to use him, I think, a little bit inefficiently, but uses him. And Dallas's defense, with the injuries that they have, is not one that really threatens you. The Steelers defense did kind of, I don't want to say got exposed last week, but there was just a little bit of a, maybe you're not as good as we think you are. No Highsmith this week again for Pittsburgh, and that is a concern over the middle, but I do still think that Pittsburgh defense is going to give Dallas a lot of problems offensively. And quite frankly, Dallas's offense is a little bit, one-dimensional at this point. The team can't run for shit, and they have one good receiver. You're telling me that Mike Tomlin can't figure that out? So I think the Steelers win this one kind of going away. And we talk about like, we're not taking the Steelers seriously enough when everything resumes on Monday. Speaking of Monday Night Football, it is the Chiefs taking on the New Orleans Saints. We'll get to that in a second. We got to talk fantasy. Yeah, Conrad, Mooney's beasting. And we kind of talked about Mooney as someone that you may want to look at from a waiver wire standpoint. But he is certainly benefiting from Kirk Cousins, probably the most of anyone in that offense. And so if you need, I think there's going to be a little bit more of a aggressiveness for some teams in fantasy. Like Toxic earlier had Mike Evans. So I think Eric, who's playing Toxic this week in the Vampire League, needs to maybe be a bit more aggressive. And so this is where I think lineup construction comes in. So if you're like Conrad and Mooney torched you, or if you are like Eric and you're playing Toxic who had Mike Evans, or you're like me and you're a little bit behind, I think this is where you go with a little bit more boom or bust sort of players. There are guys on your bench who are going to be the more safe ones, probably, right? Like we talked about Zach Moss before. He's safe. Devin Singletary's safe. They're not going to blow up, but they're not going to kill you. But I do think when you are behind in those sorts of ways, I do think that it is smart to kind of go out and go with the, all right, home run swing, man. Let's fucking go. Maybe we were just going to go with Sam Darnold before, but fuck it, man. Let's roll with Justin Fields and just see what happens. See if we can get a rushing touchdown or two in there as well. So yeah, that's... I think that needs to be kind of discussed here, is that you do need to be a little bit more aggressive with your lineups. And so I forgot to do fantasy breakdowns for a couple of games. So going back, Packers against the Rams, I just said, I think you're starting Jordan Love this week, and you're probably starting Jordan Love every week. And you're starting basically all the Green Bay pass catchers, right? Like Wicks. I think Reed is so talented, and I just got that one wrong this preseason. And Dubs has a chance to get into the end zone, so I think you have to start all of those guys. I'm in a spot similar to you, Conrad, where in one of my leagues, my season has gone to shit, and it is another week where I'm kind of projected to be on the wrong side of things. So I'm throwing Wicks in just to try to get that home run swing out of it. You can start Josh Jacobs. I think that's going to be a good one. And Emmanuel Wilson. I don't think you can roll him out there as a for sure start just yet. But if you're in a desperate situation, I do think that he's getting a little bit more of the workload out in Green Bay than people were anticipating. And so he can be a guy that in deep leagues you can throw out there and at least hope. For the Rams, there isn't a whole lot. It's Kyron Williams. Green Bay's defense, I don't think is that good that you just don't start Matthew Stafford this week. It's not that bad that you absolutely have to, but I think he is a very valuable streaming option, and I don't trust any of the pass catchers in LA right now. Cowboys against Steelers from fantasy standpoint, I do think that as an if you are desperate sort of a play, Justin Fields is pretty good as a streaming option this week. Najee Harris is a go, and for deep leagues, Cordell Patterson. If Najee Harris isn't playing, which definitely check that, or sorry, if Jalen Warren isn't playing, which definitely keep an eye on that. But Cordero Patterson, I think, has some value in this offense. We know Arthur Smith loves him. We know that the kind of the lightning in Thunder and Lightning combinations in Pittsburgh actually works pretty well. And so I think you can go with that. And then George Pickens is a play. For Dallas, I would not be... If I could avoid Dak this week, I would. I'm not starting any of the running backs, and CeeDee Lamb is kind of the only receiver that you can go with. And I haven't talked about tight end a whole lot in any of these. If you have the tight end in any of these matchups, just fucking throw them out. And see what happens. Sorry, Toxic. I should be a bit more specific. What's considered a deep league? 12 teams? I wouldn't consider a 12-team league super deep necessarily. I guess that 12 is kind of the whatever. Anything beyond 12, I would consider deep. Like I consider a 14-team league deep, and I consider a 16-team league to be deep. And then anything beyond that, you're a fucking psychopath. But for 12 teams, if it is moderately competitive, or deeper benches, then you can consider that deep. But when I am saying like, oh yeah, Cordero Patterson in a deeper league, I am thinking more 14 and 16 team leagues. Oddly enough, I'm seeing more 16 than 14. It's funny, once you get to 14, it's like, yeah, fuck it, man. Let's just get half the league. Let's go. But I do think that's, not a bad Not a bad suggestion there. Anyway, 18-team Dynasty League. Let's go. Holy hell. That's something, man. That's crazy. I've never played an 18-team league before. The 16 is the deepest I've gone. 16-team with 5 keepers and a bench that is way too deep for that sort of a thing. But would love to try something a little bit deeper like that. Also, I'm not in any like full dynasty where you play like the whole season and there's a rookie draft and you can add and drop guys throughout the offseason and stuff like that and you just keep everyone. I'm not in one of those. So I'd like to do that too. That would be a fun kind of a rainy day episode, like different kind of fantasy leagues I would like to try. We're doing one this year with the Vampire League, and it is a lot more difficult than I thought. But it's been a lot of fun to try and get that going, but a win would be nice in it. All right, Monday Night Football. It is the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the... Oh, dude, Game Over Dynasty. Yeah, I mean, look, Game Over. There's going to be announcements on hirings here probably pretty soon, but we're going to have a deep roster, so we could do just like a full NHL like sim league where we're basically going to have enough players or enough people in the league to just do like the entire league and just roll with it that way. By the way, sim league, something I have to try at some point. Baseball probably more than any other sport, but it would be fun to do in anything. Monday Night Football, Saints, Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs are favored by 5.5 points with the total, I believe, I don't know why I closed my app. Well, I do know why. Someone offered me a lowball trade offer. Is 42.5. So the Kansas City Chiefs, everybody is hurt. Everybody hurts. And I'm kidding. It was a joke. Kind of. It was the Kansas City Chiefs. Everybody is hurt right now, right? Rashee Rice, his leg got put on backwards. Isaiah Pacheco broke something. And so there isn't a whole lot of offensive weaponry here. But I do think that this is now the start of the Travis Kelce playing himself into shape world tour, where he goes out and kind of reminds us all of how good how good he can be in still as a tight end and show why he is one of the greatest tight ends, probably the greatest tight end in the history of the sport. But it's going to be tough for Kansas City to move the ball. And for one thing in this game, I have a ton of respect for the New Orleans Saints defense. I am probably going to avoid the side in this. I think Kansas City wins because they are just a better team than the Saints. But given the injury issues that Kansas City has, I do think that this is going to be on the lower side. So I'm going to take under 42.5. The Saints offense, I think they're starting to normalize a little bit. It's not this juggernaut that we saw in the first couple of weeks of the season, but it's not we're only scoring 12 points against the Eagles. I think they're going to be selling right around maybe an average offense with some high-end upside. But I do think that this is going to be a week where Kansas City shuts things down. Having McDuffie as kind of your lockdown corner is so valuable because they can just put him on Olave and it's just done. And then you can kind of bracket Shaheed, and there isn't a whole lot else that the New Orleans offense can do. So I do think that, again, this is going to be a real low-scoring game. From a fantasy football standpoint, for the Saints, I just said that they're going to try to just, like, one-on-one take away Olave. You still kind of have to play him. And we have seen number 2 options do well against Kansas City this year. You think back, like, Likely has an unbelievable game, right? Mike Gesicki has a really, really good game for the Bengals. And then in week 3, it was the Falcons. And again, it was Mooney who comes up with a pretty good game. Now, London has a good drive late, and that gets him kind of over what we had talked about before. But, and then in the Chargers, like, they don't have any passing options that can really do anything against you. So, I do think that this is a game where you can roll with Shaheed a little bit, and you kind of just have to trust with Olave and hope that scheme-wise, there's a late drive where they just kind of throw him the ball a ton. Keep an eye on Taysom Hill. If he is not in the lineup, I think Juwan Johnson as the tight end can be a good option for you, for sure, as a kind of late, panic move. And if you are super desperate, I do think Noah Gray, the backup tight end for Kansas City, does help get that ball rolling a little bit with this team because they just need high-level pass catchers right now. And I don't know if Gray would categorize as high level, but I would trust him more than I would trust like Juju Smith-Schuster or anything right now. So I think that they're going to see a little bit more of that. So if you want to roll with Taysom Hill and roll the dice, like I'm going to have to in one of my leagues, and just kind of hope for the best that either he is playing or whatever, then you can, or you find out, I guess, earlier and you don't have to. But I think you can then pivot to a couple of the options in this game. On the Kansas City side, I can't believe I'm saying this. I would try to not start Mahomes. He has, I listen to the fantasy footballers. He's basically a streamer right now, and this isn't a good matchup for him. And so I would be looking elsewhere for Patrick Mahomes options if I were you. And honestly, I would not go with Derek Carr here, but it would be an interesting thing to go through and figure out, okay, who would I start over Patrick Mahomes? So I would kind of try to not. Kareem Hunt, if you can get over the type of dude that he is, you can absolutely throw him into your line. Obviously, you picked him up, you kind of crossed that bridge. So if you have him, you are starting him. I do think Samaje Perine has the option and has the ability to do something, because I do think this game's going to be close. And so I think the pass catching back has some value. And again, given the injuries that Kansas City has, they are just going to have to throw it to talented players. Yeah, Crimney, Drake London is back. We got that one loud and clear from the Atlanta Falcons that he is back. And even Kyle Pitts having a pretty good game. Maybe we need to recalibrate what we think of Tampa Bay's defense a little bit. Tampa Bay's turning into a team we can't really trust, right? We think we can trust them against Denver. Shit kicked. We don't think we can trust them against Philadelphia. Dominated. We think we can maybe trust them against Atlanta. Shit kicked. So we're kind of all over the place on the Tampa Bay defense there after we saw that this week. But for pass catching options, like I said, I think Perine is a sneaky play this week. And I do think that you can roll with Worthy. I would be interested to see how Dennis Allen tries to take him out. And like I said, if you're desperate because of Taysom Hill's injury situation, I think you can roll with Noah Gray in this game, because Kansas City just needs people who can catch the football right now.